On a scorching summer evening in 2008, Tucson, Arizona, the Sandoval family's white Chevy Suburban disappeared into the shimmering heat waves of the Sonoran Desert. Security footage from a gas station in Marana captured the silhouettes of a father, mother, and two excited children preparing for what was supposed to be a weekend camping trip. Less than 2 hours later, their vehicle was spotted at a roadside diner in Casa Grande. By midnight, their headlights vanished into the darkness of the desert highway. And from that moment, no one saw the Sandoval family again. 14 years later, the Arizona community remains haunted by unanswered questions. Was it a tragic accident or a carefully concealed crime? Each clue, from weathered tire tracks to forgotten witness statements, slowly unveils a chilling secret buried beneath the desert sand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. On July 18, 2008, Tucson was enveloped in the Southwest's signature summer heat. Scorching temperatures, dry air, and occasional dust devils swirled across the parched landscape, painting the city in hues of amber and gold. On a quiet street lined with saguaro cacti and desert landscaping, the Sandoval family prepared for a weekend camping trip to Catalina State Park. Miguel Sandoval, 42, a respected civil engineer at a local construction firm with salt and pepper hair and perpetual smile lines around his eyes, stood beside his wife, Elena, 39, an art teacher at a middle school known for her vibrant personality, as she checked their supplies one last time. Their children, 11-year-old Lucas with his father's thoughtful eyes and 8-year-old Sophia with her mother's creative spirit, bounded around the driveway, eager for the adventure ahead. Lucas clutched his new telescope, hoping to spot constellations away from the city lights, while Sophia carried her sketchbook, ready to capture the desert's natural beauty. In the blistering afternoon heat, the family of 4 loaded coolers, sleeping bags, and a tent into their 2007 white Chevy Suburban. Miguel carefully secured their mountain bikes to the rack on the back of the SUV, while Elena made one final check of their supply list. The children climbed into the back seat, already discussing which hiking trails they wanted to explore first. With a final wave to their neighbor, Miguel started the engine. The sound of the SUV's powerful motor broke the quiet of their suburban street as they pulled away, the gleaming white vehicle standing out against the terracotta landscape of their neighborhood. Around 5:30 p.m., the Sandoval family stopped at a gas station in Marana to fuel up and grab cold drinks. Security footage captured them in light summer clothes, Miguel in cargo shorts and a blue t-shirt, Elena in a flowing sundress, and the children restless with excitement. Miguel filled the tank while Elena helped Sophia select snacks inside the small convenience store. That brief clip would later become one of the few pieces of evidence showing the family alive. They continued north on Interstate 10, the highway stretching ahead like a shimmering ribbon through the vast desert landscape. By 7:15 p.m., they pulled into the Desert Rose Diner in Casa Grande for an early dinner before heading to their campsite. Inside the diner, ceiling fans stirred the cool air as a few patrons enjoyed hearty meals in vinyl booths. The Sandoval children settled at a corner table, their animated chatter about stargazing and wildlife spotting drawing warm smiles from nearby diners. Elena ordered hamburgers and milkshakes for the family while Miguel studied a trail map, plotting their weekend adventures. Miguel chatted briefly with their waitress about the weather and best camping spots, unaware that these casual interactions would later be scrutinized with agonizing detail. At 8:30 p.m., Miguel paid the bill, and the family gathered their belongings, stepping back into the still warm evening air. The Suburban's engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness before disappearing down the highway toward their destination. That was the last time anyone saw them. Throughout the weekend, the Sandoval home remained undisturbed, mail accumulating in the box, and their cat being cared for by an automatic feeder. On Monday morning, July 21st, when Maria Delgado, Elena's sister, couldn't reach them to hear about their camping trip, a sense of unease began to gnaw at her. Maria called repeatedly, trying both their home phone and their cell phones, but only heard voicemail greetings in return. By afternoon, with still no word, Maria drove to their house, her anxiety mounting with each mile. Finding the house empty, no sign of their return, she called the Tucson Police Department, her voice cracking as she reported, my sister and her entire family never returned from their camping trip. Something's wrong. They would never just disappear like this. Those words marked the beginning of one of Arizona's most perplexing missing persons cases. The report was immediately escalated to the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and by dawn on July 22, a task force had assembled at headquarters. Under harsh fluorescent lights, officers gathered around a large map spread across the conference table. Red pins marked the route from Tucson to Marana to Casa Grande, and toward Catalina State Park. Every officer present knew this wasn't a routine case. An entire family of 4 had vanished without a trace, leaving behind an empty house and countless questions. Sheriff James Mendoza, a 30-year veteran with steel-gray hair and weathered skin that had seen too many Arizona summers, addressed the room. "Every hour counts," he said gravely. "Without solid leads in the first 72 hours, our chances of finding them alive drop dramatically." That morning, a helicopter lifted off from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, flying low along the I-10 corridor and surrounding desert terrain. The vast expanse of the Sonoran Desert appeared below like an endless sea of tan and rust, punctuated by green patches of saguaro and prickly pear. The pilot swept the spotlight over sharp turns and desert pullouts, places where an SUV could have veered off, but radioed back only familiar sights, rocky outcroppings, dry washes, and the occasional abandoned structure. On the ground, search teams fanned out across the desert. Officers in lightweight tactical gear, armed with binoculars and water packs, combed through the rugged terrain, checking ravines and arroyos. K-9 units were deployed at rest stops and trailheads, sniffing for any trace of the Sandovals. At one point, the dogs showed interest in a particular area off Highway 79, but closer inspection revealed only discarded camping equipment from unrelated travelers. While search teams worked in the scorching heat, analysts at command headquarters pieced together what little information they had. A gas receipt confirmed Miguel Sandoval had filled the tank at 5:38 p.m. on July 18. The grainy Marana footage showed a tall man, a woman with shoulder-length hair, and 2 children briefly visible in the SUV's windows. The Desert Rose Diner footage provided clearer images, the family enjoying dinner, Lucas excitedly pointing to his map of constellations, Sophia doodling on a paper placemat. Then came their walk to the parking lot, into the SUV, and the headlights fading into the night. After 8:45 p.m., the trail went cold, no credit card transactions, no cell phone signals, no credible sightings. In the first 48 hours, the Pima County Sheriff's Department escalated efforts, coordinating with neighboring counties and the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Divers searched reservoirs and water catchments within a 50-mile radius of the family's last known location. Helicopters continued scanning, their infrared cameras cutting through the darkness, but the desert below remained stubbornly secretive. Park rangers at Catalina State Park confirmed the Sandovals never checked in at their reserved campsite. Their equipment remained untouched, waiting for campers who never arrived. With each passing hour, hope of finding survivors dwindled. The summer heat in Arizona was unforgiving, daytime temperatures soared above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and without adequate water, survival time in the open desert was measured in hours, not days. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By July 25, a week after the disappearance, a grim report landed on Sheriff Mendoza's desk. No vehicle, no bodies, no signs of a crash. Not a single clue suggested what might have happened after the Sandoval family left the Desert Rose Diner. Search efforts had covered hundreds of square miles of desert with nothing to show for it. As tense glances were exchanged across the room, Detective Rafael Cortez, a seasoned investigator with sharp eyes and a reputation for solving the unsolvable, voiced what others were reluctant to consider. "If this wasn't an accident," he said quietly, "we need to look at the possibility that it was deliberate." The suggestion changed the trajectory of the investigation. On July 27, after 9 days of fruitless searching, the Pima County Sheriff's Department shifted focus to the last place the Sandovals were seen, the Desert Rose Diner in Casa Grande. The small roadside establishment, typically catering to truckers and travelers along I-10, became the focal point of the investigation. Detective Cortez met with the diner's owner, a weathered woman named Dolores Ramirez, and her entire staff from the evening of July 18. A young waitress named Jenny Morales, her dark hair tied back in a ponytail, clearly remembered serving the Sandoval family. They came in around 7:15, she recalled. The father was tall, friendly, asked about good camping spots. The mother kept the kids from getting too rowdy. They seemed so happy, you know? Just a normal family excited about their trip. But then Jenny's expression changed, her brow furrowing as she described something that had bothered her that night. There was this man sitting at the counter. I didn't think much of it at first, but he kept watching them. Not like a casual glance, but really studying them. When Mr. Sandoval went to pay, the man followed his movements like he was memorizing something. When pressed for details, Jenny described a muscular man in his late 30s with a closely trimmed beard and a distinctive scar across his right forearm. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, but I could see his eyes, cold, calculating. Made my skin crawl a little. He nursed his coffee for an hour, barely touched his food. The moment the Sandovals left, he threw down some cash and hurried out maybe 2 minutes after them. This detail was immediately noted, as it suggested the Sandoval family might have been followed. Detective Cortez requested all security footage, but to his dismay, the diner's outdated system only kept recordings for 3 days. By July 27, the crucial footage had been overwritten, leaving them with only the waitress's testimony. The detective's report highlighted this development. Witness describes bearded male, approximately 35 to 40, muscular build, with distinctive arm scar, observing the Sandoval family at the diner. Subject departed immediately after victims. Security footage unavailable. Further investigation needed to identify subject. This report marked the first connection to a criminal theory, a stranger's interest in the family at their final sighting. The description was detailed enough to pursue but too vague without supporting evidence. That evening, Detective Cortez shared the update with Maria Delgado at her home in South Tucson. Hearing about the man watching her sister's family, Maria clutched her husband's hand, her face paling. Miguel didn't have enemies, she whispered. He was kind, honest. If someone was watching them. Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought. In the following days, a sketch artist worked with Jenny Morales to create an image of the mystery man. The result showed a square-jawed face with deep-set eyes and a distinctive scar on his right forearm. The sketch was distributed to local law enforcement agencies and the FBI for database comparison, but initial feedback yielded no matches. By the end of the second week, the command team had established a timeline: the Sandoval family's stop at the Marana gas station at 5:30 p.m., their dinner at the Desert Rose Diner until 8:30 p.m., and then, nothing. All leads vanished into the desert night. Questions multiplied. Did the bearded man follow them? Was he connected to their disappearance or merely a coincidence? The ambiguity became the case's central challenge, opening a new line of investigation while deepening the mystery. From this point forward, the shadow of the unknown man began to loom over the entire investigation, a spectral presence that might hold the answers to the Sandoval family's fate. The witness statement from the Desert Rose Diner left a lingering question: a bearded stranger watching the Sandovals, then vanishing without a trace. With this lead stalling, the Pima County Sheriff's Department expanded their search parameters, focusing on the vast desert areas between Casa Grande and the Catalina Mountains. The reasoning was straightforward: if the Sandoval family didn't make it to their campsite after leaving the diner at 8:30 p.m., they likely met with disaster somewhere along the dark desert highways. A single navigational error, a moment of distraction, or something more sinister could have sent their Suburban off the road into one of the countless ravines or washes that cut through the landscape like ancient scars. On August 2, 2 weeks after the disappearance, a specialized desert search team was dispatched to a remote area near Picacho Peak, a striking volcanic formation that rises dramatically from the desert floor. This location was flagged due to its proximity to the family's planned route and its treacherous terrain, steep slopes, hidden gullies, and numerous blind spots where a vehicle could disappear from view. That morning, the Sonoran Desert was already baking under a merciless sun. The search team, equipped with advanced terrain vehicles and heat-resistant gear, spread out in a grid pattern. They scanned dried creek beds and rocky outcroppings, places that flash floods could have carried a vehicle during the monsoon season. Search coordinator Mark Hernandez, communicating via radio, directed the team's movements. "Check every wash and ravine," he instructed. If the Suburban went off-road, it could be partially buried by now. After hours of methodical searching, a team member radioed in from a location approximately 2 miles off Highway 79. "Got something reflecting sunlight in the bottom of a wash," the voice crackled over the radio. Moving in to investigate. Hearts racing, the search team converged on the location. As they approached, they discovered a piece of twisted metal lodged in the sand, a vehicle part glinting in the sun. Carefully extracting it, they found it was a chrome bumper strip, weathered but relatively recent. Initial excitement faded when closer examination revealed it wasn't from a Chevy Suburban, but rather an older model pickup truck, likely abandoned years earlier. It was yet another false lead in a case increasingly defined by disappointments. The search continued for 3 more days, covering a radius of nearly 30 miles from Picacho Peak. The team recovered various items, discarded tires, metal fragments, even an old camping stove, but nothing connected to the missing Sandoval family or their vehicle. The report to Sheriff Mendoza was discouraging. Extensive search of Picacho Peak area yielded no evidence related to the Sandoval case. Desert terrain complicates recovery efforts. Vehicle may be in a location not visible from air reconnaissance. Local headlines the next day in the Arizona Daily Star read, "No trace in the desert, Sandoval family still missing." The community's initial shock was giving way to a heavy, persistent unease. Over the following weeks, smaller search operations continued with diminishing returns. Forensic analysts modeled potential routes and scenarios, but the possibilities were too numerous to explore comprehensively. The case was hitting another dead end. In the investigation log, the words "vehicle may be concealed by natural terrain features" were underlined in red. It wasn't just a status update but a sobering reality. The vastness of the Sonoran Desert might forever keep the secrets of what happened to the Sandoval family on that July evening. As August turned to September, and the blistering summer heat showed no signs of relenting, the theory that the Sandovals had met with a tragic accident in the unforgiving desert landscape took hold. It was both an explanation and a haunting question mark. A family vanished into the vastness of Arizona, perhaps never to be found. With no trace of the Suburban or the Sandoval family after weeks of searching, the Pima County Sheriff's Department widened their investigation to include the family's personal connections. If the disappearance wasn't an accident, the question became, who would want to harm this seemingly ordinary family? Among the contacts reviewed, one name stood out: Victor Ramirez, a contractor who had worked with Miguel Sandoval on several construction projects in Tucson. Ramirez, 38, muscular with a closely trimmed beard and a distinctive scar on his right forearm from a construction accident, matched the description provided by the Desert Rose Diner waitress with unsettling accuracy. Financial records revealed that Miguel had won a competitive bid for a major municipal project over Ramirez's company 6 months before the disappearance. The contract, worth $1.2 million, would have secured Ramirez's struggling business, but instead went to Sandoval's firm. Following this, Ramirez's company faced bankruptcy, and he blamed Miguel personally for undercutting his bid. Coworkers at Miguel's engineering firm recalled a confrontation in the office parking lot in May 2008, just 2 months before the family vanished. One witness distinctly remembered Ramirez shouting, "You've destroyed everything I built. You think you can just walk away from this?" On a crisp autumn morning in October 2018, 10 years after the Sandoval family vanished without a trace, Detective Sofia Martinez drove through the familiar streets of Tucson with purpose in her eyes. Recently transferred to the cold case unit, the 34-year-old investigator had requested the Sandoval file as her first assignment. With her reputation for solving the unsolvable, Martinez was drawn to the case that had haunted Arizona for a decade. The department had changed since 2008, new faces, advanced technology, different priorities. But for many veteran officers, the Sandoval case remained an open wound, a painful reminder of an investigation that had gone cold despite their best efforts. Martinez parked outside headquarters, the desert sun warming the interior of her car. On the passenger seat lay a worn cardboard box containing every scrap of information collected about the disappeared family. She'd spent countless hours studying these files, memorizing names, dates, and leads that had long since grown cold. Inside, she made her way to a small, windowless room that would become her second home. Taping a large map to the wall, she began marking significant locations: the Sandoval's Tucson home, the Marana gas station, the Desert Rose Diner in Casa Grande, and the vast, empty spaces where search teams had combed the desert for any trace of the missing family. Beneath the map, she pinned 4 photographs: Miguel, Elena, Lucas, and Sofia Sandoval. Their smiling faces looked back at her, frozen in time. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," she whispered, making a silent promise to the family who had been forgotten by almost everyone except their loved ones. Martinez's approach differed from her predecessors. Instead of focusing solely on the desert terrain where the Sandovals might have met with an accident, she returned to the human element of the case, particularly Victor Ramirez, the contractor who had been briefly investigated in 2008. Her first step was to track down Jenny Morales, the waitress who had seen the bearded man watching the Sandoval family at the Desert Rose Diner. After some research, Martinez discovered that Morales had moved to Phoenix, working as a nurse and raising 2 children of her own. On a warm November morning, Martinez made the drive to Phoenix, her mind racing with questions. Would Morales remember details that hadn't made it into the official report? Could time have clarified her memories rather than erased them? Jenny Morales welcomed Martinez into her modest home, offering coffee as they sat at her kitchen table. Though a decade had passed, the case still troubled her. "I've never forgotten that night," Jenny said, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Sometimes I still dream about it, that family, so happy, and the man watching them. I always wondered what happened after they left." Martinez showed her the original sketch and a more recent photograph of Victor Ramirez taken from social media. Jenny studied both carefully, then nodded with certainty. "That's him. The same cold eyes, the same scar on his arm. He sat at the counter, watching them the entire time. I remember thinking it was strange, how focused he was on them. Not in a curious way, but almost predatory." Martinez pressed gently. "Was there anything else? You remember? Anything you might not have mentioned back then?" Jenny closed her eyes, concentrating. "When the family was leaving, I overheard the little girl, Sofia, I think, say something about being excited to see the stars. The man at the counter, he smiled for the first time that night. Not a warm smile, but something satisfied. Like he knew something they didn't." This detail never made it into the original report. Martinez recorded Jenny's statement meticulously, thanking her for her time. As she was leaving, Jenny caught her arm. "Detective, find them. Those children would be adults now. Their family deserves answers." Back in Tucson, Martinez added Jenny's confirmed identification to her growing evidence board. The connection between Ramirez and the Sandovals was becoming clearer, but without physical evidence, it remained circumstantial. She needed more. Digging deeper into Ramirez's background, Martinez discovered something the original investigation had missed. Shortly after the Sandovals' disappearance, Ramirez had abruptly sold his contracting business and purchased a remote property near Sells, Arizona, on the Tejano-O'odham Reservation. The timing was suspicious, but even more curious was how he had afforded it. Bank records showed a sudden cash infusion of $50,000 with no clear source. Martinez also learned that following the Sandovals' disappearance, Ramirez had briefly relocated to New Mexico before returning to Arizona in 2012. This gap in his local presence explained why he had fallen off the radar in the original investigation. In December 2018, Martinez presented her findings to Captain Rivera, the head of the cold case unit. The veteran officer listened carefully, his weathered face revealing nothing as Martinez outlined her theory. Ramirez had motive. He blamed Miguel Sandoval for his financial ruin. he was identified at the last place the family was seen alive. He suddenly came into money and purchased remote properties shortly after their disappearance. It's not conclusive, but it's enough to reopen the investigation. Rivera nodded slowly. You've done good work, Martinez, but we need more. Physical evidence, something tangible to connect him directly to their disappearance. Without that, it's just another theory. Martinez understood the challenge. A decade had passed, and physical evidence would be scarce, degraded by time and the harsh desert environment. But she had one idea that might change everything. Modern satellite imaging and terrain mapping had advanced significantly since 2008. What if the Sandoval's vehicle was still out there, hidden in a location that previous search teams couldn't access or detect? Martinez contacted Dr. Alexis Chen, a geospatial analyst at the University of Arizona. Together, they developed a plan to use advanced satellite imagery to scan the desert terrain between Casa Grande and the Catalina Mountains, focusing on areas that would be difficult to spot from ground level or even helicopter surveys. Over the next 3 months, they analyzed hundreds of satellite images, looking for any anomaly that might indicate a vehicle hidden beneath brush or partially buried in a wash. The process was painstaking, with many false leads and disappointments. Then, in March 2019, they found something, an unusual reflection pattern in a remote arroyo approximately 15 miles east of Highway 79, in an area so rugged it had been deemed inaccessible during the original search. The object was partially buried by sand and vegetation, but its rectangular shape was distinct from the surrounding natural features. Martinez immediately assembled a specialized recovery team, including desert survival experts and forensic investigators. The location was challenging to reach, requiring off-road vehicles and ultimately a half-mile hike through difficult terrain. As they approached the arroyo, the team fell silent. There, half buried in sand and partially hidden by creosote bushes, lay the weathered remains of a white Chevy Suburban. After 11 years exposed to the brutal Sonoran elements, the vehicle was almost unrecognizable, paint bleached by the sun, windows shattered, tires long since rotted away. But the license plate, though corroded, was still legible, AZWHT 4729, matching the Sandoval's vehicle. "We found them," Martinez whispered, her voice catching. After all this time. The recovery process was meticulous. Forensic technicians photographed everything before disturbing the scene. As they cleared away sand and debris, the full story of what had happened began to emerge. The Suburban hadn't crashed, it had been deliberately driven into the arroyo and attempted to be concealed. There were no skid marks or signs of an accident. More telling, the driver's side door was open, but the other doors were locked from the outside. Inside the vehicle, they found personal belongings, Lucas's telescope, Sophia's sketchbook, Elena's silver turquoise bracelet. But there were no human remains. This discovery changed everything. If the Sandovals weren't in the vehicle, where were they? Had they survived, only to perish in the desert? Or had something far more sinister occurred? Forensic teams combed the surrounding area in expanding circles, using ground-penetrating radar to search for disturbed soil that might indicate burial sites. After 2 days of searching, they made a grim discovery, an area of disturbed ground approximately 200 yards from the vehicle, partially hidden beneath a large mesquite tree. Excavation revealed human remains, 4 sets, 2 adults and 2 children, buried in a shallow grave. Preliminary examination suggested they had not died from exposure or accident, but from gunshot wounds. Martinez stood silently at the edge of the grave, a mixture of vindication and profound sadness washing over her. After 11 years, the Sandoval family had been found. Now it was her job to deliver justice for them. Back at headquarters, the discovery sent shockwaves through the department. Officers who had worked the original case gathered around Martinez's evidence board, many overcome with emotion. For years, they had assumed the family had met with a tragic accident. The reality was far more disturbing. Forensic analysis of the vehicle yielded crucial evidence. Despite years of exposure to the elements, technicians discovered blood traces in the back seat that matched the Sandoval children's DNA. More significantly, they found a partial fingerprint on the inside of the glove compartment that didn't belong to any family member. Running the print through an updated AFIS database, they got a match: Victor Ramirez. The connection was no longer circumstantial. Armed with this evidence, Martinez obtained a warrant to search Ramirez's property near Cells. The remote location consisted of a small ranch house and several outbuildings, surrounded by miles of desert scrubland. Ramirez, now 48, appeared surprised when officers arrived, but maintained an unsettling calm as they presented the warrant. "I have nothing to hide," he said, though his eyes told a different story. The search team methodically examined every inch of the property. In a shed behind the main house, they found something unexpected: a collection of items that clearly belonged to the Sandoval family. Miguel's watch, Elena's university diploma, Lucas's baseball trophy, and Sophia's favorite stuffed animal. These weren't random souvenirs, they were personal, meaningful items that only someone with intimate knowledge of the family would have selected. Ramirez had kept them for 11 years, hidden away but preserved, like trophies. Even more damning, in a locked box beneath the floorboards of the shed, they discovered a .38 caliber revolver. Ballistics later confirmed it matched the bullet fragments recovered from the remains. With this evidence in hand, Martinez and her team arrested Victor Ramirez on April 12, 2019. As they placed him in handcuffs, Martinez looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of remorse. She found none. "They were just a family going camping," she said quietly. "Why?" Ramirez's expression remained cold. "He took everything from me," he replied, as if that explained murdering an entire family, including 2 innocent children. News of the arrest spread rapidly through Arizona media. Tucson residents who had lived with the mystery of the Sandoval family's disappearance for more than a decade were stunned by the revelation that it had been murder, not an accident, and that the perpetrator had been living among them all this time. Maria Delgado, Elena's sister, collapsed in tears when Martinez called with the news. "All these years," she sobbed, "I've been lighting candles on their birthdays, hoping they might somehow still be alive. At least now we can lay them to rest properly." The Sandoval case became headline news across the Southwest. Local stations ran special reports, recounting the family's last known movements, the years of searching, and Detective Martinez's relentless pursuit of the truth. The community, which had largely forgotten the case, was reminded of the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. In the weeks following Ramirez's arrest, Martinez continued building the case against him. The evidence was substantial: his presence at the Desert Rose Diner, his fingerprint in the Suburban, the personal items found at his property, and the murder weapon with his DNA on it. But Martinez wasn't satisfied with just physical evidence. She wanted to understand the full story: how Ramirez had intercepted the family, what exactly had happened that night, and why he had kept their belongings for all these years. On May 3, 2019, Martinez conducted a formal interrogation of Ramirez at the Pima County Detention Center. With his attorney present, she laid out the evidence against him, piece by piece. "We know you were at the Desert Rose Diner watching them," she began. "We know you followed them after they left. Your fingerprint is in their vehicle. We found their personal items at your property. And we found the gun you used to kill them." Ramirez remained stoic, saying nothing as Martinez continued. "What I don't understand is why. Miguel Sandoval won a contract over you. That happens in business all the time. It doesn't explain murdering an entire family." After a long silence, Ramirez finally spoke. "It wasn't just the contract. Sandoval knew my bid was based on substandard materials. He could have kept quiet, that's how business works. Instead, he reported it to the municipal board. I lost my license, my reputation, everything I had built for 20 years. Martinez leaned forward. "So you decided to take everything from him?" "I followed them from the diner," Ramirez continued, his voice flat and emotionless. "I had a gun. I only planned to confront him, to make him understand what he'd done to me. But when I pulled them over, pretending to be having car trouble, things escalated. The wife recognized me from the confrontation at his office. She started screaming, the kids were crying. I panicked. The confession was recorded in meticulous detail. Ramirez described forcing the family at gunpoint to drive to the remote arroyo, where he executed them one by one before burying their bodies and attempting to conceal the vehicle. I took those things from their house later, he added, referring to the personal items. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself that actions have consequences, his and mine. Martinez's report to the prosecutor contained the full confession, along with all physical evidence. The case against Victor Ramirez was airtight. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and numerous other felonies. The Sandoval family was finally laid to rest in a proper funeral on June 15, 2019. Hundreds of Tucson residents attended, many of whom had never known the family but had been touched by their story. Maria Delgado, supported by her husband, placed flowers on each casket, whispering goodbye to the sister and family she had spent 11 years searching for. For Detective Sofia Martinez, the case marked both an end and a beginning. She had delivered on her promise to find the truth, but the victory was bittersweet. No amount of justice could bring back the Sandoval family or erase the years of uncertainty their loved ones had endured. At a press conference following Ramirez's arraignment, Martinez addressed the media. Cold cases are never truly cold, she said. They're just waiting for someone to shine a new light on them. The Sandoval family deserved better than to be forgotten. Every missing person deserves that same commitment. Her words resonated with families across Arizona who were living with their own unresolved mysteries. In the months that followed, the Cold Case Unit received numerous requests to re-examine long-dormant investigations, each representing someone's loved one who had never come home. As summer turned to fall in 2019, Martinez watched from the gallery as Victor Ramirez's trial began. The courtroom was packed, the community still reeling from the revelation that a killer had been living among them for more than a decade. Prosecutor James Alvarez presented a methodical case, starting with the Sandoval's last known movements and ending with the evidence recovered from Ramirez's property. Martinez testified for 2 days, detailing how satellite technology had finally revealed the location of the vehicle, and how modern forensic techniques had connected Ramirez to the crime. Jenny Morales also took the stand, her voice steady as she identified Ramirez as the man who had watched the family in the Desert Rose Diner 11 years earlier. I've never forgotten his eyes, she said, looking directly at the defendant. They're the same cold eyes I see now. Ramirez's defense team attempted to portray the killings as a crime of passion, not premeditation, arguing for reduced charges. But the evidence of planning was overwhelming. Ramirez had followed the family, created a ruse to make them stop, and methodically eliminated witnesses. After 3 weeks of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Caroline Henderson sentenced Ramirez to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. As Ramirez was led from the courtroom, Martinez caught his eye one last time. There was still no remorse there, only a cold acceptance of his fate. For 11 years, he had lived with his secret, believing he had gotten away with the perfect crime. Now, justice had finally caught up with him. The Sandoval case made national headlines, featured on true crime shows and podcasts. Many focused on the technological advances that had made it possible to locate the vehicle after so many years, while others highlighted the human element, Detective Martinez's determination and Jenny Morales's unforgettable witness testimony. For the community of Tucson, the resolution brought a measure of closure to a mystery that had haunted them for more than a decade. Parents who had held their children a little tighter after the Sandovals disappeared could finally explain what had happened, a cautionary tale with at least some justice at its end. Maria Delgado established a scholarship foundation in her sister's name at the middle school where Elena had taught art. Each year, it would provide funding for a student pursuing education in the arts, ensuring that Elena's passion for creativity would continue to inspire future generations. At the Cold Case Unit, the Sandoval file was officially closed, the box sealed with red tape marked resolved. But its impact continued to reverberate through the department. Martinez's success inspired a renewed commitment to older cases, with resources allocated specifically for reviewing unsolved disappearances using the latest technology. As Christmas approached in 2019, Martinez visited the Sandoval's gravesite, placing a small cactus bloom on each stone. The family that had disappeared on a summer evening 11 years earlier had finally come home, their story complete, their killer brought to justice. Standing in the cemetery as the desert sun began to set, Martinez reflected on the journey that had led her here. Cold cases were more than just files gathering dust, they were unfinished stories, waiting for someone dedicated enough to write their final chapters. "We didn't forget you," she whispered to the Sandoval family. "And now, no one else will either." The story of the Sandoval family and Detective Martinez's relentless pursuit of justice became a defining moment in Arizona law enforcement history. It demonstrated that with determination, technological advancement, and a refusal to let cold cases remain forgotten, even the most seemingly perfect crimes could eventually be solved. For families across the Southwest living with their own unresolved disappearances, the case offered something precious: hope. If the Sandovals could be found after 11 years, perhaps their loved ones might someday come home too. And for detectives facing their own impossible cases, Sofia Martinez became a reminder that persistence could ultimately uncover even the most deeply buried truths. As 2019 drew to a close, the Tucson community began the slow process of healing from a wound that had festered for more than a decade. The mystery that had haunted their collective consciousness had finally been resolved, though the tragedy of what had happened to the Sandoval family would never be forgotten. On a crisp October morning in 2023, the Arizona State Courthouse in Tucson stood as a solemn monument to justice. For years had passed since Victor Ramirez's conviction, but the case that had captivated the state was far from over. The ornate building, with its desert-toned sandstone exterior, was surrounded by a sea of reporters and community members. Some carried signs bearing the Sandoval family's photographs, images that had become emblematic of both tragedy and perseverance. Inside, the wood-paneled appellate courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Detective Sofia Martinez, now promoted to lieutenant, sat in the front row. At 38, the years of dedication to justice had etched fine lines around her eyes, but her gaze remained unwavering. Beside her sat Maria Delgado, Elena Sandoval's sister, clutching a small turquoise pendant that had once belonged to Elena. Victor Ramirez's appeal was about to be heard, a last-ditch effort to overturn his 4 consecutive life sentences. His defense team had filed challenges to the search warrant that led to the discovery of evidence at his cell's property, arguing that satellite technology used to locate the Suburban constituted an unreasonable search. The 3-judge panel entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Chief Justice Catherine Monroe, known for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment to constitutional rights, presided over the proceedings. Ramirez's attorney, Thomas Wilson, presented his arguments with practiced precision. The satellite imaging used to locate the Sandoval's vehicle was conducted without specific judicial authorization for that technology. This constitutes a violation of my client's Fourth Amendment rights. The prosecution countered firmly. The satellite imaging was conducted over public land, not Mr. Ramirez's private property. Furthermore, the technology merely identified a location that led to a properly obtained search warrant. No constitutional violations occurred. For 2 hours, legal arguments flowed back and forth, the technical nuances of modern surveillance technology colliding with constitutional protections established centuries before. Martinez watched intently, understanding that even the most airtight case could unravel on procedural grounds. As the hearing concluded, Justice Monroe addressed the courtroom. "We will take these arguments under advisement and render our decision within 90 days. Those 90 days stretched like an eternity for everyone connected to the case. Martinez continued her work at the cold case unit, but her thoughts frequently drifted to the possibility that a technicality might undo years of painstaking investigation. On January 15, 2024, the Arizona Court of Appeals delivered its unanimous decision: Ramirez's conviction would stand. The court ruled that satellite imaging of public land did not constitute a search requiring prior judicial approval, and that all subsequent warrants had been properly obtained. "The evidence of Ramirez's guilt is overwhelming and properly obtained," wrote Justice Monroe in the opinion. Technology may evolve, but the principles of justice remain constant. The ruling made headlines across the country, establishing important precedent for the use of advanced technology in cold case investigations. Legal experts debated its implications, with many noting that the decision struck a careful balance between embracing technological advances and protecting constitutional rights. For Martinez and the Sandoval family's loved ones, the ruling meant something far more personal. It ensured that justice, once served, would endure. Following the appellate decision, public interest in the Sandoval case resurged. National news programs produced special features, podcasts dedicated multiple episodes to exploring the investigation, and true crime authors began research for books about the case. Maria Delgado, who had maintained a dignified silence throughout most of the proceedings, decided it was time to share her family's story in her own words. With Martinez's support, she began working with a respected journalist to create a memoir titled 11 Years of Waiting, My Sister's Story. I want people to remember Elena, Miguel, Lucas, and Sofia as the beautiful, loving family they were, not just as victims in a headline, Maria explained at a small press conference announcing the project. Their lives meant something. Their story deserves to be told completely. Meanwhile, Martinez found herself increasingly sought after as a speaker at law enforcement conferences nationwide. Her methodical approach to the Sandoval case had become a model for cold case investigators facing similar challenges. At a major forensic science symposium in Phoenix in March 2024, Martinez delivered the keynote address to a packed auditorium of detectives, forensic specialists, and prosecutors. Cold cases aren't just unsolved puzzles, she began, her voice carrying through the hushed room. They're promises we've yet to keep, to victims, to families, to communities. Every file gathering dust represents someone waiting for answers, someone who deserves to be remembered. She walked the audience through the investigation, from her initial review of the decades-old file to the satellite technology that finally located the Suburban. But she emphasized that technology alone hadn't solved the case. Advanced tools are valuable, but they're no substitute for the fundamentals: listening to witnesses, revisiting evidence with fresh eyes, and most importantly, refusing to let time diminish our commitment to the truth. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom had their own unsolved cases haunting them. The thunderous applause that followed her speech reflected not just admiration for her work but renewed determination in their own pursuits of justice. As Martinez's reputation grew, so did the cold case unit in Tucson. What had once been a small, underfunded department of 3 detectives expanded to a team of 8, with dedicated forensic specialists and modern laboratory facilities. Budget allocations increased, and new technologies were embraced. By April 2024, the unit had reopened dozens of long-dormant cases, applying the lessons learned from the Sandoval investigation. Within 6 months, they had solved 3 additional cold cases, a 1997 homicide, a 2001 disappearance, and a 2005 sexual assault. Each resolution brought closure to families who had been waiting years for answers. Martinez made it a personal policy to be present whenever families were notified of breakthroughs in their loved ones' cases. She understood that each piece of information, whether it brought relief or confirmed worst fears, represented a critical moment in their healing journey. The waiting is often the hardest part, she explained to a new detective who had joined the unit. When you've lived with uncertainty for years, even difficult answers can bring a kind of peace. This philosophy became the unofficial motto of the unit: truth first, then healing can begin. The success of the cold case unit attracted attention from law enforcement agencies across the Southwest. Representatives from departments in New Mexico, Nevada, and California visited to study their methods and implement similar approaches in their own jurisdictions. In June 2024, a documentary film crew arrived in Tucson to produce a feature-length examination of the Sandoval case and its lasting impact on cold case investigation. Titled Desert Secrets: The Search for the Sandoval Family, the film would trace the complete arc of the case, from the 2008 disappearance through the 2023 appeal. The filmmakers conducted extensive interviews with everyone connected to the investigation: Martinez and her team, the original detectives from 2008, forensic specialists, satellite imaging experts, prosecutors, and the Sandoval family's friends and relatives. Jenny Morales, whose crucial testimony about seeing Ramirez at the Desert Rose Diner had been a cornerstone of the case, spoke on camera for the first time about her experience. "I've carried that night with me for 16 years, she said, emotion evident in her voice. "Sometimes I still wonder if I could have done something, said something, that might have saved them. But I'm grateful I remembered his face, that my memory could help bring some justice to that family." The documentary's most powerful moments came from Maria Delgado, who opened her home to the filmmakers, sharing family photographs, home videos, and personal stories that transformed the Sandovals from statistics into living, breathing people with dreams, quirks, and boundless love for one another. "Elena called me every Sunday night, without fail," Maria recalled, tears glistening in her eyes as she held up a faded photograph of her sister. "When that first Sunday passed after they disappeared, and the phone didn't ring, that's when I knew in my heart something terrible had happened. But I never stopped hoping I was wrong." The filmmakers approached Martinez last, understanding that her perspective would frame the entire narrative. They interviewed her at the Cold Case Unit office, surrounded by the case files and evidence that had consumed years of her life. "What made you choose the Sandoval case as your first assignment?" the director asked. Martinez considered the question carefully. "I remember seeing their photographs on the news when I was still in the academy. Those 4 smiling faces, and then nothing, just gone on a summer evening. It stayed with me. When I joined the Cold Case Unit, their file was waiting. It felt like a responsibility I couldn't ignore." "And what would you say to other detectives facing seemingly unsolvable cases?" "Time is both your enemy and your ally," Martinez replied. "It erodes evidence but brings new technologies, new perspectives. The key is persistence, believing that the truth is still out there, waiting to be found." The documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2025, receiving critical acclaim and numerous awards. When it was released nationwide in March, it sparked renewed interest in cold cases across the country, leading to increased funding for investigative units and a surge in tips from the public about long unsolved crimes. More importantly, it humanized the investigation process, showing the dedication and emotional investment of the detectives who refused to let cases go cold. Viewers saw firsthand the toll that these cases take on investigators and the profound sense of purpose that drives them forward. Following the documentary's release, Martinez was approached by the Arizona State University School of Criminal Justice to develop a specialized course on cold case methodology. She agreed, believing that sharing her knowledge with the next generation of investigators was as important as solving cases herself. Her course, Cold Case Investigation in the Digital Age, quickly became one of the most sought-after classes in the program. Students learn not only technical skills but also the human elements of investigation, how to approach families with sensitivity, how to keep compassion alive without compromising objectivity, and how to sustain determination through years of setbacks. The technology will continue to evolve, Martinez told her students during the first lecture. But the fundamental questions remain the same. Who are we seeking justice for? What do they deserve from us? And what will we do when conventional methods fail? In July 2025, Maria Delgado's memoir about her sister's family was published to widespread acclaim. The book offered a perspective rarely seen in true crime literature, an intimate, loving portrait of victims as complex individuals rather than tragic footnotes. Maria embarked on a national book tour, speaking to packed auditoriums about the importance of remembering missing persons as people first, not just cases. At each event, she set up a small table with resources for families of missing persons, connecting them with support groups and investigative agencies. At her Tucson appearance, Martinez sat in the front row, watching as Maria spoke with eloquence and raw emotion about her 17-year journey from loss to resolution. When the formal presentation concluded, Maria spotted Martinez in the audience and beckoned her to the stage. "This woman," Maria said, her arm around Martinez's shoulders, "refused to let my sister and her family be forgotten." When others saw a dusty file, she saw 4 people who deserved answers. That's the kind of dedication we should demand for every missing person, every unsolved case." The audience rose in a standing ovation, many wiping away tears. The moment captured what the Sandoval case had come to represent: the power of persistence, the importance of memory, and the possibility of justice even after hope seems lost. In August 2025, a memorial was unveiled in a small park near the Sandoval's former Tucson home. The simple stone monument featured 4 desert wildflowers carved into the surface, representing Miguel, Elena, Lucas, and Sofia. Beneath their names, a single line read, "Remember always, justice without time limits." The ceremony was attended by hundreds of community members, many of whom had participated in the original searches or followed the case through its many developments. Mayor Rodriguez spoke about the impact the case had on Tucson's collective consciousness and how it had transformed the city's approach to missing persons. "Today, we don't just dedicate a memorial," the mayor said. "We renew our commitment as a community to remember, to search, and to never abandon hope." Martinez, standing quietly at the edge of the gathering, watched as Maria Delgado cut the ceremonial ribbon. Though she had been invited to speak, Martinez had politely declined. This moment belonged to the family and to the community that had carried their memory for 17 years. As the crowd dispersed, Maria approached Martinez, taking her hands. "Elena would have liked you," she said softly. She believed in persistence too. She never let her art students give up, even when they thought they couldn't create something beautiful. Martinez smiled, squeezing Maria's hands in return. "In a way, I feel like I know her. All of them." "You do," Maria assured her. "You found their truth. That's knowing someone in the deepest way possible." The memorial became a place of reflection for the community and a symbol of hope for families still waiting for answers about their own missing loved ones. Fresh flowers appeared regularly at its base, placed by strangers who had never met the Sandovals but had been moved by their story. In September 2025, Victor Ramirez's final appeal to the Arizona Supreme Court was denied, permanently sealing his fate. The court's decision was brief but definitive: the evidence of guilt is overwhelming, the trial was fair, and justice has been served. With all legal avenues exhausted, the case was officially closed. Martinez received the news via email while working on a different cold case. She paused briefly, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction, then returned to the file before her: another family waiting for answers, another truth to uncover. That evening, after work, Martinez visited the Sandoval Memorial alone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the stone wildflowers, giving them a warm, golden glow. She placed 4 small stones on top of the monument, an ancient gesture of remembrance. "It's finished," she said quietly. "Your story is complete." As she walked away, Martinez's phone buzzed with a text from Captain Rivera, new lead on the Hernandez disappearance from 2010. Witness came forward after seeing the documentary. "Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Martinez typed a quick reply, "I'll be there," and smiled to herself. The cycle continued. For every case closed, another waited. For every family that found answers, another still searched. The work of remembering, of seeking truth, never truly ended. And that, she realized, was exactly as it should be. In November 2025, the International Association of Cold Case Investigators held their annual conference in Tucson, a deliberate choice to honor the Sandoval case and its far-reaching impact on the field. Detectives, forensic specialists, prosecutors, and technology experts from around the world gathered to share methodologies, discuss challenges, and celebrate successes. Martinez delivered the opening address, standing before colleagues who understood the unique challenges and rewards of cold case work better than anyone. "We are the memory keepers," she began, her voice steady and clear in the vast conference hall. "When files are archived and media attention fades, we remember. When conventional wisdom says a case is unsolvable, we question. When technology evolves, we adapt. But most importantly, when families continue to wait, we persist." She spoke about the transformation of cold case investigation over the past decade, how advances in DNA analysis, digital forensics, and imaging technology had revolutionized the field, but also how the fundamental human elements remained unchanged. The most sophisticated database in the world can't replace intuition, determination, and compassion, she continued. Victor Ramirez wasn't caught by satellite technology alone. He was caught because a waitress remembered his eyes 16 years later, because we refused to accept that a family could simply vanish without explanation, and because we understood that time may obscure truth but never erases it. The conference featured a special panel discussion with the key figures from the Sandoval investigation: Martinez, the satellite imaging experts, the forensic team that had processed the vehicle and remains, and Maria Delgado representing the family. Together, they provided a comprehensive overview of how the case had progressed from cold file to resolution. During the question-and-answer session, a detective from Boston raised his hand. "Lieutenant Martinez, what would you say was the most important factor in solving the Sandoval case?" Martinez considered this carefully. "Interconnection," she finally replied. "Understanding that no single piece of evidence, no single witness, no single technological tool would solve the case alone. It was the connections between them, how Jenny Morales' testimony linked to Ramirez's motive, how the satellite imaging led to physical evidence, how modern forensic techniques confirmed what witnesses had suggested years earlier. Cold cases are solved when we see the patterns connecting seemingly isolated facts." The conference concluded with a ceremony honoring detectives who had solved significant cold cases in the past year. Martinez received the association's Lifetime Achievement Award, a recognition that typically went to investigators at the end of their careers, not to someone in their 30s. The Sandoval case has become a blueprint for cold case investigation in the digital age, the association president announced as he presented the award. "Lieutenant Martinez has demonstrated that persistence, innovation, and compassion can overcome even the greatest challenges in seeking justice for victims who can no longer speak for themselves." Martinez accepted the award with characteristic humility. "This belongs to every person who refused to let the Sandoval family be forgotten," she said. From the original investigators in 2008 to the forensic teams who worked tirelessly in 2019, from the witnesses who kept their memories alive to the prosecutors who ensured justice was served. Cold case work is never a solo effort, it's a relay race where each person carries the baton as far as they can before passing it on. As the conference ended and detectives returned to their jurisdictions across the country and around the world, many carried with them new techniques, renewed determination, and the understanding that no case is truly unsolvable. The ripple effects of the Sandoval investigation would continue to influence cold case work for generations to come. In December 2025, just before Christmas, Martinez received an unexpected visitor at the cold case unit office. Jenny Morales, whose testimony about seeing Ramirez at the Desert Rose Diner had been so crucial to the case, arrived with a small package. "I've been meaning to give you this for a while," Jenny said, placing the carefully wrapped item on Martinez's desk. "After the documentary aired, I received a letter from Sofia Sandoval's best friend from elementary school. She had kept this all these years." Martinez unwrapped the package to find a small framed drawing, a child's artwork showing 5 stick figures standing beside what appeared to be a telescope under a star-filled sky. At the bottom, in a child's careful printing, were the words, "My family looking at stars." By Sofia Sandoval, age 8. "She drew this the week before they disappeared," Jenny explained quietly. Her friend said Sofia was so excited about their camping trip, about seeing the stars with her new telescope. "I thought you should have it." Martinez stared at the simple drawing, feeling the full weight of its significance. This wasn't evidence or a case file, it was a glimpse into the joy and anticipation of a child whose life had been cut short. It was a reminder of why the work mattered. "Thank you," Martinez said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means more than you know." She placed the drawing on her desk, where it would remain, a constant reminder that behind every case file was a human story. Behind every investigation was a life worth remembering. As 2025 drew to a close, the impact of the Sandoval case continued to reverberate through Arizona and beyond. cold case units in departments nationwide adopted the Martinez method, a comprehensive approach that combined technological innovation with traditional investigative techniques and a deep commitment to the human elements of each case. Families of missing persons found new hope as long-dormant cases were reopened and examined with fresh eyes and new technologies. The documentary and Maria's memoir had humanized the investigation process, helping the public understand the complexity and importance of cold case work. For Martinez herself, the Sandoval case had been transformative, both professionally and personally. It had defined her career and established her as a leading voice in the field. But more importantly, it had confirmed her belief that persistence in the face of seemingly impossible odds could ultimately yield truth and justice. On New Year's Eve, Martinez visited the Sandoval Memorial one last time before the calendar turned. The desert air was cool and crisp, the stars brilliant in the clear night sky. She stood silently, thinking of the family who had set out for a camping trip 17 years earlier, eager to show their children the constellations. In the quiet of the memorial garden, Martinez made a silent promise to carry forward the lessons of the Sandoval case, to approach each cold file with the same determination and compassion, to remember that behind every unsolved mystery were people who deserved to have their stories completed. As she turned to leave, she noticed a young woman placing flowers at the base of the monument. The woman looked up, offering a tentative smile. "Are you Lieutenant Martinez?" she asked. Martinez nodded. "My brother disappeared in 2015, the woman said softly. After seeing what you did for the Sandoval family, I finally found the courage to push for his case to be reopened. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late for answers." Martinez reached out, briefly touching the woman's shoulder. "It's never too late," she agreed. "And no one deserves to be forgotten." As she drove home through the streets of Tucson, Martinez reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her from a rookie detective fascinated by a cold case to a lieutenant whose work had changed how an entire field approached investigation. The Sandoval family had found justice, and in doing so, had created a legacy that would help countless others find their own answers. In her rearview mirror, the lights of Tucson sparkled against the desert night, reminding her of Sophia Sandoval's drawing, stars shining over a family filled with hope and possibility. Though their story had ended in tragedy, their memory now served as a beacon, guiding others through the darkness of uncertainty toward the light of truth. And in that transformation, from victims of an unspeakable crime to symbols of enduring justice, the Sandoval family had achieved a kind of immortality. They would be remembered not just for how they died, but for how their case had changed the landscape of cold case investigation forever. For Sophia Martinez and for the countless investigators who would follow in her footsteps, that would be the most meaningful legacy of all, the understanding that with enough determination, with enough heart, and with enough time, no case was ever truly cold. Only waiting for the right person to remember, to care, and to persist until the truth finally emerged from the shadows. In February 2026, a Netflix documentary series titled Desert Justice, the Sandoval investigation premiered worldwide, catapulting the Arizona cold case into international prominence. The 6-part series delved deeper than any previous coverage, exploring not only the investigation and trial but also examining how cold cases affect communities, law enforcement, and the families left behind. The series featured intimate interviews with Martinez, Maria Delgado, and others involved in the case, but also expanded to include perspectives rarely highlighted in true crime media: the neighbor who watered the Sandoval's plants while they were supposed to be camping, the schoolteacher who kept Lucas's desk untouched for months hoping he would return, and the detective who first took Maria's missing persons report on that fateful July day in 2008. What made the series particularly compelling was its exploration of the ripple effects of both the crime and its eventual resolution. Viewers witnessed how the Sandoval's disappearance had transformed Tucson's approach to missing persons, influenced police procedures across the Southwest, and created a lasting legacy in cold case investigation. The series director, Emmy Award winner Gabriela Ortiz, had approached the project with unusual sensitivity. "This isn't just another true crime story," she explained in press interviews. "It's about memory, persistence, and how a community carries the weight of its unsolved mysteries." The final episode focused on Martinez's current work and the cases that had been solved using methodologies pioneered during the Sandoval investigation. It concluded with a powerful scene at the memorial, where families of other missing persons had begun leaving small tokens, photographs, letters, and mementos, creating an informal shrine to all those still waiting for answers. Within weeks of the series' release, cold case units nationwide reported dramatic increases in tips from the public. People who had witnessed something unusual years earlier but never came forward were suddenly calling in, prompted by the documentary's message that no detail was too small, no memory too faded to potentially break a case. Even more significantly, police academies across the country began incorporating segments on cold case investigation into their training programs, using the Sandoval case as their primary example. What had once been a specialized, often marginalized area of law enforcement was now recognized as an essential component of comprehensive justice. In April 2026, Martinez was invited to address the graduating class at the FBI Academy in Quantico. Standing before the nation's elite law enforcement recruits, she spoke about the unique challenges and profound rewards of pursuing justice across time. "The clock is always running in an investigation," she told them. "But that doesn't mean the game ends when the buzzer sounds. In cold cases, we're playing in overtime, the rules are different, the challenge is greater, but the points still count. Every cold case solved represents a promise kept to victims, families, and communities who have waited far too long for answers." Her words resonated deeply with the graduates, many of whom requested assignment to cold case units after completing their training. The FBI, recognizing this surge of interest, expanded its cold case initiative, dedicating additional resources to supporting local departments in reviewing and investigating unsolved crimes. Meanwhile, in Tucson, Maria Delgado had transformed her personal tragedy into a mission of support and advocacy. Using proceeds from her memoir and speaking engagements, she established the Sandoval Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and advocating for cold case investigation. The foundation provided financial assistance for private DNA testing, offered counseling services for families living with uncertainty, and maintained a database connecting families with similar cases. Most importantly, it served as a community where those experiencing the unique pain of having a missing loved one could find understanding and hope. "When Elena and her family disappeared, I felt so alone," Maria explained at the foundation's launch event. "No one truly understands the limbo of not knowing unless they've lived it. This foundation exists so no family has to navigate that darkness without support." Martinez served on the foundation's advisory board, helping develop protocols for families seeking to have cold cases reopened and training volunteers to act as advocates within the complex criminal justice system. The partnership between Martinez's professional expertise and Maria's personal experience created a powerful force for change in how missing persons cases were handled. In June 2026, the Sandoval Foundation hosted its first annual conference in Tucson, bringing together families of missing persons, law enforcement officials, forensic specialists, and advocates from across the country. The three-day event included workshops on navigating the legal system, understanding forensic developments, maintaining mental health during prolonged uncertainty, and preserving the memory of missing loved ones. Martinez led a panel discussion on the future of cold case investigation, joined by experts in forensic genealogy, artificial intelligence applications in criminal investigation, and advanced imaging technologies. They discussed how evolving tools were revolutionizing the field and offering new hope for cases that had remained unsolved for decades. "Technology is advancing exponentially," Martinez explained to the attentive audience. "Cases that seemed impossible to solve 5 years ago are now being resolved through techniques we couldn't even imagine. The key is ensuring these tools are available to departments of all sizes, not just major metropolitan agencies." The most powerful moment of the conference came during an evening vigil at the Sandoval Memorial. Hundreds of family members of missing persons gathered, each holding a photograph of their loved one. As the desert sun set, casting long shadows across the memorial garden, they shared stories, shed tears, and kindled hope in one another's hearts. Maria stood beside Martinez, watching the gathering with a mixture of sadness and pride. Elena would be amazed by all this, she said softly. She always believed that pain should be transformed into purpose. Martinez nodded. Your family's story has changed how we approach cold cases forever. That's a powerful legacy. Not just their story, Maria corrected gently. Our story. Yours too, Sophia. You're as much a part of this as anyone. The conference concluded with a commitment to make it an annual event, rotating between cities across the country to ensure accessibility for as many families as possible. Plans were already underway for the following year's gathering in Chicago, with expected attendance to double. As summer transitioned to fall, Martinez found herself increasingly torn between her work at the cold case unit and the growing demands for her expertise nationally. She had received offers to head cold case divisions in larger departments, consulting opportunities with federal agencies, and even a proposal to develop a specialized training program for the National Academy of Criminal Investigation. After much consideration, she made a decision that surprised many but felt intuitively right to her. Rather than leaving Tucson for a more prestigious position, she proposed the creation of a national cold case resource center to be headquartered at the University of Arizona, with satellite centers at law enforcement academies across the country. The most valuable asset in cold case investigation isn't a single detective or even a team, she explained to Captain Rivera when outlining her vision. It's the collective knowledge, the shared methodologies, and the integrated approach that brings together law enforcement, forensic science, and technological innovation. This center would allow us to extend that approach nationwide. With support from the university, state law enforcement agencies, and private foundations impressed by the Sandoval case resolution, the proposal moved forward with remarkable speed. By November 2026, the National Cold Case Resource Center was established, with Martinez serving as its founding director while maintaining her role with the Tucson Cold Case Unit. Place of pilgrimage for both families of missing persons and law enforcement professionals. Visitors from across the country and around the world came to pay their respects and to draw inspiration from the case that had transformed cold case investigation. On the 5th anniversary of the discovery of the Sandoval's remains, Martinez visited the memorial alone. The desert wildflowers were in bloom, carpeting the surrounding landscape in vibrant colors that seemed to celebrate life even in the harsh Arizona terrain. As she stood in silent reflection, Martinez noticed a small stone placed atop the monument, the traditional symbol of remembrance. Beside it lay a child's drawing, protected in a weatherproof sleeve. It showed a family looking at stars, much like Sophia's original artwork that Jenny Morales had given her years earlier. This one, however, had been drawn recently by a child who had never known the Sandovals. At the bottom, in careful printing, were the words, "Thank you for helping find my uncle. Now we know what happened to him too." Martinez recognized it immediately, the niece of a missing person whose case had been solved the previous month using methodologies developed during the Sandoval investigation. The child had never known her uncle, who had disappeared before she was born, but the resolution of his case had brought healing to her family after 17 years of uncertainty. In that moment, Martinez fully grasped the profound meaning of the work she had dedicated her life to. Cold cases weren't just files to be cleared or statistics to be improved. They were interrupted stories waiting for their final chapters, fragmented families seeking wholeness, communities carrying the weight of unanswered questions. And every time a case was solved, whether after 5 years or 50, it created possibilities for healing that extended far beyond the immediate family, touching lives that might never have known the victims personally but were nevertheless affected by the restoration of narrative integrity to a story long left unfinished. As Martinez turned to leave, she noticed Maria Delgado approaching with a small group of people, families of recently resolved cold cases who had come to express their gratitude at the memorial that had become a symbol of hope for so many. Maria embraced Martinez warmly. "These families wanted to meet you," she said. Their loved ones' cases were solved using what we learned from Elena and her family. For the next hour, Martinez listened as each family shared their story, the years of uncertainty, the moments of despair, and finally, the profound relief of learning the truth, however painful it might be. Their words confirmed what Martinez had always believed: that the work of cold case investigation was among the most meaningful pursuits in law enforcement. One elderly woman, whose daughter had been missing for 22 years before her case was resolved, summed it up best. "For 2 decades, I existed in limbo," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not knowing if my child was alive or dead, if she was suffering or at peace. Learning the truth, even the hardest truth, freed me from that limbo. I could finally grieve properly, finally begin to heal. You gave me back my life by finding hers." As the sun began to set over the memorial garden, casting long shadows across the stone wildflowers that represented the Sandoval family, Martinez reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a single cold case assignment had grown into a movement that was transforming how justice was pursued across time. The Sandoval family, Miguel, Elena, Lucas, and Sofia, had vanished on a summer evening in 2008, leaving behind questions that would take 11 years to answer. But in the process of finding those answers, something remarkable had happened. Their story had become a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope for countless other families waiting in the limbo of uncertainty. This, Martinez realized, was perhaps the most meaningful legacy of all, that a family taken too soon had nonetheless changed the world in ways they could never have imagined. Their memory lived on not only in the hearts of those who had known and loved them but in the transformed landscape of justice itself. As Martinez and Maria walked together from the memorial, they spoke not of the past but of the future, the upcoming conference, the expanding work of the Resource Center, the next generation of investigators being trained in methodologies born from the Sandoval case. "We've come so far," Maria said, looking back at the memorial one last time before they left. "Elena would be proud of what her family's story has accomplished." Martinez nodded, thinking of the countless families who had found answers because of what began with the Sandoval case. "They're still changing lives," she said softly. "Every day, in ways we might never even know." And that, perhaps, was the truest measure of justice, not merely punishment for wrongdoing, but the restoration of meaning to lives interrupted, the transformation of tragedy into purpose, and the enduring promise that no story deserves to remain unfinished, no matter how much time has passed. For Sofia Martinez and for investigators following in her footsteps around the world, the lesson of the Sandoval case would continue to guide their work, that with enough determination, with enough heart, and with enough time, the truth could always be found. And in that truth, however painful, lay the seeds of healing not just for individuals but for entire communities who carried the weight of their unsolved mysteries. As night fell over the Arizona desert, stars appeared in the vast sky, the same stars that Lucas Sandoval had hoped to view through his telescope on that summer night 19 years earlier. Martinez gazed upward for a moment, reminded of Sofia's drawing and the family that had never completed their camping trip. "We remembered," she whispered to the stars. "We found you. And because of you, so many others have been found too." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.